Welcome to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Leslie Spellman.
Hello and welcome listeners to episode 112 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Ingrid. In today's episode, I'm talking to Sue from Sheffield, which is in the north of the UK. Sue has been a member of the Declutter Hub for about a year now and has been making great progress. So welcome, Sue. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm honoured to be here, actually. I was it was lovely being asked. Thank you.
Pleasure. I mean, we know our listeners we know they love me and Leslie chatting about loads of different things, but we know that they really appreciate us. That sounds a bit crazy, but like talking to real people, people who have clutter and they can just recognize themselves in the stories. And we're just so grateful to any of our members or of our listeners that comes forward and says, we'd love to be on the podcast, because I know our listeners really appreciate it. So thank you in advance for sharing your story, Sue. That's fantastic. So let's just get to know you a little bit before then. So, you are a member of the Declutter Hub. We're going to talk about the Declutter Hub a little bit later. But can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Well, that's a bit of a long story. I shall try and make it short. I'm retired. In my working life, I worked partly in training, partly in personnel management. And I also ran my own business for a while. And I've lived overseas, but I've mainly been in this country. I'm not sure when my problem started. I think, if I had to put my finger on it, it might have been when I followed my husband's career, as we obedient married women did in those days. We went to live overseas and the marriage turned toxic, I'm afraid, and I needed to leave in something of a hurry. And I came back to Britain with not very much. So at that stage, I didn't have much and I didn't have a problem. But I'm thinking maybe that's when my problem started, that coming back with not much, I was trying to build up my life, I suppose.
I can really understand that. So basically you're saying, I never really had a clutter problem, actually, until I kind of had almost nothing left and I wanted to rebuild my household.
That makes sense. I've thought about it long and hard. And I think if I had to put my finger on when it happened, I would say that was the problem. And then going forward, when I was running my own business and working from home, actually, we self-employed people, Ingrid, you will know this, work extraordinarily hard. And I didn't really have time. I let a lot of householdy things go. So now I'm retired. I thought, okay, now's the time. Now's the time to try and get a handle on this. But it's not been easy.
Because you worked a lot of hours as a self-employed person. And I think you've done a lot of volunteering work as well. You're very involved in your community. So housework and the home was not on the top of your priority list?
No, it wasn't on the top of my priority list. But unfortunately, I think I got into bad habits. I'd also accumulated years worth of stuff, which of course is the problem. So yes, far too much stuff and bad habits have combined to give me the problem I've got, I think.
I want to talk about the stuff some more, but I'm interested in the bad habits. What would you consider a bad habit for yourself that you think this is why I've gotten here where I am now?
Oh, do you want a list? Well, I live by myself, which is it's part of the problem because I only have myself to please. The same token, I don't have to contend with anybody else's mess. It's all my own mess. But it means that if I don't put things away, there's nobody to say, that needs to be put away or whatever. So yes, not putting things away, not finishing projects. If I start something, I don't know if I get bored towards the end. It could be whatever, but I'll have a number of unfinished projects lying around. Procrastination, that's another one. I've got a list of things that need to be done, and I can spend a lot of time avoiding doing them. In fact, I spend more time avoiding doing them than if I just did them, then they'd be done and I could tick them off.
So is it mainly like things like cleaning and housework and dishes, or is it, I want to sort out that pile of random things in the corner?
Oh, no, it's everything. No, you put it that way. It's everything. So I might have a phone call I don't particularly want to make. How difficult can that be? But I can put off making that phone call or writing that email and just keep putting it off. So no, it's not just householdy things, Ingrid, it's everything.
I see. Okay. And if you talk about unfinished projects, is that then, because in my mind, I was thinking DIY projects, is that all DIY project, or is it also again a combination of decluttering and tasks?
Oh, combination of projects there. Some DIY. I say obviously, because if you're on your own, there's nobody else to do it. It's all down to me. But decluttering tasks as well. I mean, that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. That's why we're here. So, for example, I've got folders, files of paperwork on particular things. And I say, okay, I will go through the folders in that cupboard. And that would be a task. And 2/3 from the end, I'll think, oh, I'm bored with this now. So I don't finish it. So I don't have a nice decluttered filing cabinet or whatever it is. I've got 2/3 of a decluttered filing cabinet. And then the unsorted papers will be on the floor because that's where I've done the sorting. So it's messy.
And I find it's very interesting because a lot of people think that it's only about the stuff, isn't it? But it's also about, indeed, what you're saying, procrastination and getting 2/3 or 3/4 through and then not finishing the project. It's about holding off on doing something until it's almost like completely critical and urgent. Well, when the letter or email or form that had to be filled in could have been done earlier, but because it was put off. So it's a combination of things. And a lot of my clients who I work with in real life, they say, I thought decluttering was just about the stuff, but it's also, when you start to declutter, it's all the little jobs that need to happen that come out of the decluttering. A little research project, for example, or, oh, I found lots of batteries that now need to go to recycling, or, oh, I found these old VHS tapes that I want to have transferred into DVD. So I need to find a guy or a girl with a computer who can do that for us. So it's the jobs that come out of the jobs as well, isn't it? That kind of can make it feel quite overwhelming.
Yeah, most definitely. There are so many individual decisions to be taken with each decluttering task. And that is really, really challenging, really hard.
Yeah. I completely hear you. So if we then look at the stuff, have you pinpointed things where you think, yes, that's where I have too much of?
I could just really say everything. I mean, I've thought about this. Being in the Declutter Hub means that you think about things more. So it focuses your attention on, well, where is the problem? So things fall into categories, obviously. Clothes is a big one. Now, I had an absolute win a few years ago with clothes because I engaged the services of a delightful lady called the Wardrobe Angel, who has unfortunately hung up her wings. She's no longer doing it. Now, first of all, it was really scary to admit there was a problem and choose someone to come into my home and help me go through my wardrobe. That was scary in itself, but I'm so glad I did it. She was amazing. We worked hard. I think she was with me for about 6 hours and we got rid of 5 bin bags of clothes. And it was reassuring to have her because I felt I trusted her judgment. She made me try everything on and she would say, yes, that suits you. No, it doesn't. It fits or it doesn't fit, or this is out of style or whatever. And I was very happy to trust her judgment. I think if you've also paid someone, it's crazy not to take their advice. So that was a job well done. So the clothes are less of a problem now, but I feel I could do with some more help there, but that's less of a problem. Paperwork is a big problem. Paperwork is inherently boring. I mean, with a wardrobe, you could say, okay, I'll go through my wardrobe this afternoon and I'll try things on. And it will be have quite a lot of fun doing that. Put a CD on and enjoy the afternoon. But paperwork is inherently dull. And there's a lot of that. There's partly a lot of that because having run my own business, you tend to keep stuff. You have to keep financial records for longer than you would like. But also, I'm a sort of pre-internet age person, really. although I love the internet. So if I used to see articles in magazines, I thought, well, that's interesting, I'll keep that. So I've got stacks of useful and interesting articles about all sorts of things, which perhaps when the time comes are not that interesting or useful, but I've still got them. Things that might come in handy, that sort of useful things. Pieces of wood, those sorts of things. I'm never going to use them, but that's where they are. My car is not in the garage.
And I think that's what you see a lot with people who are a little bit older. They keep stuff because it might come in handy one day, isn't it? It's that generation of make, do, and mend.
Absolutely. We're brought up with a slightly post-war generation, and our parents didn't have anything, and it was all make, do, and mend, and you didn't throw things away. And that's the mindset. And on one level, it's quite useful to have the mindset not to be wasteful, but it can go too far.
I think it's so interesting what you say, because I think it is somebody, for example, with wood in a garage, somebody who has a wood burner and uses that wood to put it on in the winter to have a nice open fire, then it is suddenly useful. But for somebody who never sees themselves doing a wood project, doesn't have a wood burner, and it's just kind of lying about there gathering dust, then suddenly it's become useless. But for you, it is. Well, for somebody else, it might be very useful. So a lot of people always say to me, well, can you not just copy paste everything you do in your own house? But it just so depends on your family, your home, what you think is important, what you will use and what you won't use. I mean, for example, my mother used to always sew things herself, had a sewing machine. But at one point, her eyes, she was getting old and she couldn't thread the needle through the thread through the needle anymore. So she at that point then said, I can leave it here in my cupboards, but I'm going to donate it to somebody else because I'm now going to need to ask a menders or a local dry cleaners to sort this out for me because I can't do it myself anymore. So it's that constant, your life evolves as well, doesn't it? From what used to be useful might not be useful now anymore to you.
I think what you said is very, very valuable. And one of the things which has helped me is our local Freegal and FreeCycle service, because it's amazing. I think they will take anything, but people find a use for anything, other people, and broken things. I mean, amazing what I've had taken by Freegal. And that has helped a lot because it means that the things aren't going into landfill, they aren't being wasted. Somebody is finding them useful, but it's still quite tough to let certain things go. And I'm been thinking about this as well. I think some of it has to do with identity, that if you've had a career, then things you did, maybe the reports you wrote or whatever, then becomes part of your identity. And even though those things aren't useful anymore, they kind of spell out to yourself your own identity. And I think that's hard.
You're so right. And I'm immediately a client of mine just popped into my head who has had a long career and has always been very involved in teaching, etc. And she's now retired, but she finds it because the work was so important to her and such a big part of who she is and her working life that she finds it really hard to slowly but surely let go of some of that paperwork that's all involved with her career, because it's exactly what you're saying, Sue. It's part of her identity. So I can really relate to that because I can see it in my working life as well when working with clients. So that makes complete sense to me. And I think it's really a slowly but surely approach is probably what works best there, and not kind of cold turkey. And it takes time to mentally get your head around it, I think. It's
definitely it's a mindset thing. As we're talking, I'm thinking back over the successes I've had. And there have been some. It isn't all doom and gloom. Going through the wardrobe, I could more easily get rid of what I would call my business clothes, because I knew I wasn't going to use a business suit anymore. So those could go, and I've now got more fun things. But even so, there are things in there that aren't the new me, which still need to be gone through. It's a process. It doesn't happen just as a one-off job. It's got to be revisited time and time again.
Yeah.
So those things were easier than the reports somehow. I've still got reports in a box that I've written. I wrote those,
Yeah.
Please tell me I don't need to keep them.
You don't need to keep them, Sue. But on the other hand, if you can make lots of wins elsewhere and the reports are the hardest thing to let go, maybe you need to wait making a decision on the reports, make wins elsewhere. And maybe that's the process for you. It's again, take in the paperwork, do the easier wins first and kind of build up to, okay, I find this harder. Or maybe you can thin the projects itself out. Maybe you don't need to keep all of the underlying paperwork where the report was based on. Maybe that can go, and maybe the report itself is the last thing. Maybe that helps and you can break it down like that.
Certainly needs breaking down, that's for sure.
Now, we were talking, because of course we prepared this podcast. We spoke in what we're going to talk about. And actually something very, very interesting happened, because when we were chatting, you said to me, Ingrid, maybe people my age downsize a lot, but you actually have upsized, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Well,
much to the horror of my family, I might say.
But explain why, because everybody always thinks that people who are older are downsizing or right-sizing, but you made a conscious decision to upsize. Why was that? Because I think our listeners find that interesting.
Okay, well, this is back to living by myself. And at the end of the day, there's nobody else who's going to be responsible for me. I've got no children. I do have family, but I'm not their responsibility. I've got to be responsible for myself. And it was experience really with my father going into special retirement housing, which informed my decision that although I don't think he was unhappy there, I think he was quite sanguine about the situation. And it wasn't such a terrible decision, but there would have been better decisions for him, I think, had we known the reality of the expense of, in this country, specialist retirement housing. So I thought, if I'm going to need more support as I get old, if I get frail, if I live that long, I would much prefer to be in my own home with live-in care. And that would probably be no more expensive, indeed might be less expensive than paying the commercial world to look after me. So I spent 2 years looking for, and eventually found a house with a little annex where, should I ever need it, my living carer can go. And if push comes to shove, I could go in that bit. Somebody else can live in the big house. But I love having the space. I haven't filled the space with extra clutter, which could have been a tendency maybe. So the clutter's a bit more spread out than it was. But no, that was the reason, so that should I ever need care, I can provide for care in my own home. And also, if you look at the prices of smaller places, by the time you've factored in solicitors' costs and moving costs and all the rest of it, you might end up with paying exactly the same money for a place half the size. Doesn't seem to be any point in that, really.
Interesting. I found that so interesting because I'd never looked at it from that way. So, especially because, of course, we had recently Jeannie was on our podcast and she talked all about downsizing and downsizing her belongings. And that's why I found it so interesting when you said, well, Ingrid, I have actually upsized. And there's a very specific reason why I'm doing that. And I think it's just so good for our listeners to know that we all have our own path that we're on and we all make decisions based on the best information that we have. And I just thought it was really interesting. And also what I love about it is that you said, I'm not going to fill up the space with lots of stuff. I'm going to keep, although I moved to a larger house, I'm still going to work on getting control of my belongings. And that's exactly why you've joined the Declutter Hub. So what happened? I mean, I know you said you are retired. So what happened that you suddenly thought, how did you feel about your house? What made the decision to join the Declutter Hub?
Well, that was a journey in itself, to be honest. I probably owned and read all the decluttering books. I haven't got them all. I've decluttered some of them. So we've got Marie Kondo, we've got the Swedish death cleaning book, we've got Stuffocation, we've got all sorts of things. And I would read these books and they would give me a little bit of inspiration, and I would do some decluttering, but somehow they didn't have the answer for me. It wasn't pushing all the right buttons. I don't know how I found the Declutter Hub. I really don't know. It must have been Googling. The only thing I can think of, I was Googling around and found you. And something sparked off, and I thought, yes, I think these ladies could be helpful. And my goodness, have you been helpful? It's been amazing. But it was a journey even getting as far as you, if you see what I mean, of going through the other possibilities. One of my friends actually hired a lady, not in this part of the world, somewhere down south, to come in and help her. And I thought that was very brave. She was somehow braver than I'd been brave enough to have the wardrobe angel come and help me with my clothes. But it was the thought of having somebody come in and help me with everything else was deeply scary. Having you and Leslie sort of there in the background and all the community, that has really done the job for me. There was something about your approach that really rang a bell with me, and I will continue with you until I've done it. I promise.
And we will be here for you, Sue, like our other members will be as well. And I just love it how positive you are about it. And you know, this is not a quick fix, 3-week, blam, 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 all done. It takes time. And you need to think about your mindset and your way of thinking and finding out what's important and where you're going to start and how you're going to start and how you're going to break down the tasks and all of those things that are involved in decluttering as well. It's never about the stuff. And I think that's what you've learned as well, isn't it, Sue?
I think what has helped the most, and I'm telling you things that you hopefully already know, is that your method actually works. If we do what you tell us to do, it works. And that was quite a light bulb moment for me. That was quite a revelation. So my first light bulb moment was moving things into the room where they should be, just moving things from A to B. Why didn't I think of that? You know, it's not difficult. It's not, except it is. And so that was my first step, was just to move things into the room that they should be. And that was good. Another thing was to go for quick wins. I'd saved lots of foil containers in the kitchen and curry containers from bringing things home. I had too many of them. I didn't need so many. So those got ruthlessly dealt with, and the remainder containerized. That's Leslie's favourite thing to do with things. Bulky things. It's always nice to get rid of bulky things. And so, as you will know, a recent big win for me was the magazines. I've got lots of books, and books aren't a problem. If there's bookshelf space, then books aren't a problem. But I'd got a lot of magazines that I'd subscribed. This was aspirational magazines, grand designs and antiques and homes and those sorts of things. And I looked at those, and they were occupying a huge part of one of my bookshelves. So I thought, okay, I'll have a look at these. And there was nothing in them I wanted. They'd been sat there for years, like toads on the shelf. And so that was really pleasing, getting rid of those. And they went on Freegal. People who appreciated them took them, and that was brilliant. They didn't even have to go into the recycling bin. So that was lovely. So then I thought I'll look again at these books, which I'd looked through on a number of occasions. And I thought, I'll look again. And I found not one, but 3 DIY books. 2 of them were like encyclopedias. They were large. I'd obviously bought them because it seemed like a good idea at the time. So I actually opened them. I just looked at the titles before and thought, oh, those are useful. I'll keep those. When I opened them, there were how to knock a wall down, how to build a wall, how to lay a path, how a ring main works. I mean, what was I thinking? What was I thinking that I was having these books? And now if I want to change a tap washer, I will look on YouTube, or I will get a man in. I mean, it's as simple as that. I am not going to look in my encyclopedias. So 2 of them have gone to charity. They've already gone, and hopefully somebody will find them useful. The one I kept, as much for the title as anything, was 100 More Things You Don't Need a Man For. And I thought, I can treat myself to keep that book. And goodness, it might have something useful in it. So that was a long story, really, about my book case, Decluttering, that if we do what you tell us, it actually works. And you've told me before about magazines, and I hadn't listened. But now I've listened. I've listened about the magazines, and it works.
Well, I think it is, Sue, we're all on our own path, aren't we? All the members are on their own path, and the light bulbs go off on different points in the journey. And it's just so nice to see that you are trying it, you're taking on board, you're having your successes, you're having your wins, because having those wins is so important to be motivated to do something else, isn't it?
Totally. And I do get demotivated, obviously, because there's still a lot to do. I've actually made a list of the things I have done. So if I get demotivated, I will look back at this list, and there's big things on that list, like the bookshelf and the magazines. And there's little things like all the spare coat hangers, paint charts. You get the impression of the sorts of things that I had. I have made progress, and it's measurable progress. And that's really nice to see.
Well, congratulations, Sue, on your fantastic progress. And we love having you as a member. You've got such great humor. We always enjoy your posts so much, and we just love it how you taking it all in your stride, and you're slowly but surely feeling more happier in your home. And I think that's what this is all about. So, if you could leave our listeners with kind of a final thought, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners?
Oh, now that's a hard one. I knew you were going to ask me this. And there's so many things. I think really I'd go back and say, well, become a member, join. It makes a difference. It really does. You get access to your own members area and the whole community, which is international. And I love that it's an international community. That is so special. And we cheer each other on. It isn't just Leslie and Ingrid chivying us and cheering us. It's the whole world. And so I suppose that would be my one message would be join the Declutter Hub. It's worth absolutely every penny.
Wow. Well, listeners, I couldn't agree more, Sue. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for this lovely, for saying this. And it means a lot. It means a lot. And I'm so grateful to you and to our fellow members for being here. And Leslie and I absolutely love it. And just full disclosure, listeners, I did not tell Sue to say this to you. So I'm a bit like, I'm all like, getting a bit here too as well. So I just really appreciate that. So listeners, did you find it interesting, Sue's story? Have you picked up some golden nuggets here in what she's been saying to you? Are you thinking to yourself, downsizing, upsizing, that's interesting. Or yes, I need to break down my project in small tasks, or I maybe need to look at magazines and paint and color charts of paint. Anything. We really hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode. And we just appreciate you listening and appreciate you being here. So if you know anybody else who you think, oh, wow, they would really like this podcast too, make sure you give us the declutterhub.com website, and you can find the sharing buttons under each podcast. Now, if you want to have more handy tips and advice from Leslie and I, you can find us in lots of places. We have a Facebook group too called the Declutter Hub Community, and we have a Facebook page, and we are on Instagram. And where you can find us is at Declutter Hub. If you, like Sue, want to become a member, have a look at members.declutterhub.com to find out more about our VIP membership. Thank you so much, Sue, for being here and being a guest on our show. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you.
Well, thank you. I've actually enjoyed it. And genuinely, Ingrid did not ask me to say that little plug for the Declutter Hub. It was scary. I didn't join it straight away. But it's been absolutely well worth it. And thank you to the both of you for all the help that you give.
Thank you so much. Well, listeners, that's it for this episode. And if you don't want to miss the next weekly episode, please subscribe to the Declutter Hub podcast, and it will pop into your notifications each Friday. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration and don't forget to tune in next week.